Hello, how are you? I'm Matthew, and this is Truth from the Booth. Thanks for carving out a little space for me and the voice you are about to hear. Today we leave the edges of Halifax and push up the highway to Truro, where Thursday morning I spoke with Lindsay Eagleson. This one doesn't ease you in, it grabs you. Over the next 45 minutes, Lindsay walks us through what happens when life slips, fast. A Gofundme launch to keep a roof overhead, the quiet panic of rental arrears, how quickly stable turns into scrambling, and the kind of upheaval that doesn't just hit your address, it hits your family, your routine, your sense of self. Packing your life into boxes, not knowing when or if you'll see it again. Then we go deeper, a stretch of time living in a vehicle with 2 dogs, the shelter system, and the walls you don't see until you hit them. The weight of perception, how you see yourself, and how the world decides to see you. Trying to stay connected when you've got no tech, no signal, no safety net. Guilt, identity, survival. And somewhere in all of that, what you learn about yourself and who keeps you going when things get loud and uncertain. This conversation, it stayed with me, and it might stay with you too. This is Truth from the Booth. Lindsay Eagleson's story is next on Folked Up Radio. Abandonment sleeps first, curled in doorways and policy gaps, while blame walks past with its hands in its pockets, eyes fixed on anywhere but here. The night carries an energy, not hope exactly, more the hum of survival, a fragile current running from breath to breath, from cardboard to concrete. Compassion arrives quietly. It never announces itself. It sounds like a cup of coffee set down without a lecture. A hand up offered, not a handout. Good deeds done in the margins where cameras don't look. Love still lives here, somehow, in shared cigarettes, in names remembered, in the way people watch each other sleep, as if guarding a small, borrowed peace. But everything feels illegal after dark. Existing, resting, being seen. A bench becomes a crime. A tent becomes jail time waiting to happen. Even stillness can be arrested. Death lingers, patient and polite, counting winters, counting overdoses, counting the moments no one made it back by morning. And yet, each day is momentous because survival is not small, because choosing to wake up in a world that keeps walking past you is an act of defiance. This is not failure. This is endurance. This is what it looks like when fragility learns to stand, when love refuses to leave, and when compassion, even cracked and tired, keeps showing up anyway. Lindsay Eagleson, thank you so much for joining Truth from the Booth. I really appreciate this.
Oh, thank you. I honestly really appreciate it because I think like a lot of us, we want to have our stories shared because it can be really isolating. Otherwise, when we don't have people understanding and realizing like the extent to which we are all affected by these matters. So I'm really happy to share my story.
Well, you showed up on my radar through Mariah Baker, and I'm just going to reference your Facebook page, and it's probably still pinned there. When you first appeared on my radar, you had a GoFundMe. You were looking for help with some rental arrears. So I'm just wondering how successful was that, and just give you an opportunity to give a shout out to the online support crowd.
At this time, I have had $1,963 in donations to help with my rental arrears, which I am honestly so grateful for, as I purposely took sole responsibility for in an effort to try and help my roommate save money, as she was also struggling after a job loss and was really shutting down and not coping well with the realization that soon, after years of rebuilding herself, lost her job and would be once again facing homelessness. And she is now living in the same shelter she had been previously lived in, and where she experienced some rather extensive trauma as a youth. And this is why she actually receives PATH compensation for the government, or from the government, which was wrongly mislabeled as income and used as a means to deny her access to income assistance, which she has every right to receive. Additionally, due to my own past trauma and family dynamics, that's kind of why I did everything I could to potentially avoid financially harming my mother by not signing a lease with the landlord, or continuing to sign a new lease. So primarily to avoid this and to also avoid continued accusations from my family of emotional and financial abuse of my mother, which began immediately after I was going through a very toxic and difficult separation from my ex and a misdiagnosis that had me removed from my antidepressants and immediately led to a self-harm attempt that led to me losing access to the matrimonial home, where after months of preparation, I had just registered a day home with the YWCA, which is a much longer story, but ultimately forced me to self-represent in court after being diagnosed with what was known as an adjustment disorder, substance abuse disorder, as well as cluster B personality traits. And that had me convinced that I was like a horrible person, a monster, and a narcissist. Thankfully, I had a lot of therapy. And after years of being consistently told that I am not a narcissist, I am finally coming to believe it for myself. I was initially withdrawn from my program due to a reoccurring medical emergency that consisted in total of 4 separate treatments for abdominal abscesses. And I was finally given a surgery to remove the cyst, and that was reinfecting, as well as fixing a small hernia I had. So in order to finish paying the rest of my lease and avoid using my mother's money, I used the tuition money I had received back from the school to finish the payments on that lease agreement. So unfortunately, this lengthened my inability to access income assistance and inadvertently added to my debt that I now owe to skills development. So at this time, I am not sure how much I owe to skills development. However, when I initially applied for skills development funding, I was told that if I was unable or choose to not finish the ECE program that I was attending, that I would be responsible for paying back all of the money they provided me. And so that's another reason why I'm so thankful to those who were kind enough to share, reach out, and support the GoFundMe efforts, because, you know, that's really helping me out. But I didn't even want to do that at first, because again, I was scared if any money was to come into my account, I would lose my income assistance. But it was initially suggested to me by someone I know from back in my years as an animator back in BC.
So when I started following you in late March, you were already in a vehicle. So just how did that play out? How did that happen so quickly?
So it actually took time before I officially became unhoused, and I was scrambling from one possible solution to the next in order to have my household members keep a roof over our heads. So despite warnings that if I returned to the animation industry, and that I would be responsible for paying back those skills development funding, I still attempted to fall back on it because it was one of the only things I knew. But unfortunately, with AI, as well as being a former union starter and organizer of a failed and union busted attempt, that was not happening in this province. And I was also experiencing symptoms of my adjustment disorder, again, due to the multiple issues that arose. And it led to a lot of difficulties and anxiety as to what to do. I kept trying to bounce from idea to idea. And so at one point I was talking to my former landlord, who is the sole owner of the company that owns not one, but 2 residential complexes, as well as businesses here in the HRM. Again, all the while he was pretending to be an unpaid building manager. I did not know this at the time, but I am, by nature, a very upfront and honest individual It is both one of my greatest strengths and weaknesses. I did everything I could to be upfront about what was happening, as well as my concerns regarding my family. And I was apologizing constantly for what was happening. I felt so guilty. And so I started reaching out to spaces where I could reopen my former day home and attempted to follow that route, as my efforts for the animation work were rather fruitless. And when I told the landlord about this, he told me that he would personally lend me the money and allow me to open a day home in the apartment, so the owner would not find out and I would be able to pay him back. Initially, when I moved into the apartment complex, I asked him if I could run a day home, and he said he would check with the owner, and eventually he told me that it was not going to happen. And I accepted that, so that's why I was looking for other places to go. But with that change of mind, I got so excited. But, unfortunately, I had concerns that grew, as soon after there was emails about how the owners wanted to sell the building and that many of the tenants would likely be rent-evicted. And then things just got worse, as he wanted me to eventually run the day home in a unit on the first floor where a person I knew was living. We had known each other briefly and were getting friendly, but they were experiencing their own financial hiccup that was quickly resolved, thank goodness. But that made me feel bad, because he was telling me her personal information, saying he wanted to get rid of her. And me being who I am, I'm I'm going to talk to her, because maybe we'd be able to swap apartments versus, having her. I didn't want anyone to lose a home. That would never have been my intention. But so during a discussion with her, she revealed that the landlord had informed her that he was worried I would start an illegal day home. And so I felt it was unsafe to pursue that route due to possibly letting down families if the apartment complex did get sold, as well as being concerned of those types of allegations. I didn't want someone to, throw me under the bus like that. And around that time is when I reached out to my local MLA, which many of my fellow neighbors did as well, after the owner is selling email had gone out, potentially even before that, I'm not certain. But there was a lot of factors that were in play. There was specifically a distinct lack of support from many of the social services I was told to reach out to, and after extensive support options were denied to me, I was ultimately forced to rely on my mother, which still causes me extreme discomfort and anxiety. I really did not want to do that, because there is love for my family, but I am the youngest sibling of 4, with my sisters being 13, 15, and 17 years older than myself. I was actually born closer to my nieces and nephews' ages, and had a very abnormal childhood dynamic where I was the baby of the family, but often was, babysitting my siblings' children, the ones who were still in my hometown at the time. So I felt very much like an older sibling. And then with some of my cousins, I felt very much like a middle child. I feel like I got so many different experiences. It wasn't just a singular aspect of, I'm the oldest, I'm the middle child, I'm the baby. I feel like I got a wide range of roles. I had many hats to wear as a kid. And, additionally, 2 of my nephews have experienced homelessness. They're not the only ones in my family who have, but they're the ones I'm kind of going to talk about a bit more, because I know about them more. So one, they both suffer from mental health issues. And one of them is Native, which carries much discrimination in and of itself. And the other, who's white, was formally diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I've learned that I have other members in my family that have schizophrenia. And we have a good combination of mental health issues in my family. I feel like I am the only one who will openly admit it or seek therapy, but I think a lot of people can relate to that as well. But yes, so at one point while I was living at my mother's, after my separation, my nephew, who was homeless at the time, reached out to his mother, my oldest sister, for help and to come home. He was quickly told that he was eating too much, which is something my other nephew was constantly told as well. He was ultimately forced to help my mother with a renovation that required her home to have all the electrical redone. Due to this renovation, my mother, who was supposed to be on a 6-month vacation in Texas with my uncle and his wife and her family, came back. I was still under investigation with the Department of Community Services at this time due to an attempt to unalive myself after being misdiagnosed. And so I was becoming increasingly distraught because my nephew began staying with me at my aunt and uncle's house at one point, because originally he was living in the house doing renovations on my mom's place. It was like no one should live like that. He went from being homeless to try and stay with his mom to being forced to immediately work and live in a house that had all of the ceiling removed, parts of the walls. Like it wasn't healthy. So he began staying with me at my aunt and uncle's place while they were all on vacation, and he began talking about seeing angels and demons and hearing them, and they would tell him what to do. They would try and, tell him to do bad things or stuff like that. And there is some other concerning matters that I will not discuss, but that led me to telling him, as well as my mother, that he couldn't stay there in the home with me and my daughter, as I did not believe it was safe, and that he needed professional help and support from the family. Like, I was going from traumatic situation to traumatic situation, one after the other, nonstop for years by that point. Like, I knew I had to prioritize my daughter. And I really assumed my family would support him, like my nephew. But instead, his mother, my sister, paid for him to go and live back in Toronto where he was before, gave him money for items, for work, and I believe he was living in a halfway house, and eventually he later was arrested. And I've recently been informed that he is now out and doing well. I'm a bit skeptical on the doing well part because, I think my family likes to underplay the trauma and,
A lot going on in the background with the family history, and I can't begin to imagine the huge disruption in any family life with being unhoused. Is it still disruptive for you?
It certainly is. But it began long before becoming unhoused due to all that was going on through physically as well as emotionally, mentally, everything. My daughter went back to her mama's on March 19th, and I will be getting her back on April 17th. So almost a full month, which has been so incredibly hard as I have dedicated so much of my time as a parent into her development and trying to facilitate her with anything that she could want or need for her overall development. My daughter was the one person who I continuously fought through everything that has happened or will ever happen in my life. She was my little sunshine and is absolutely the primary reason I'm still here today. She is the reason I am no longer scared to talk to others. She is who I challenge myself to be brave for. Everything I do is in an effort to provide for her and give her every chance to fulfill her dreams, curiosity, and future aspirations. Like, I just want her to have a safe, supportive, and secure life.
Okay.
I had a lot of ups and downs over all of this, from the support of my school peers in appealing the school's decision and creating a petition where 98% of them signed, as well as others, which I'm still extremely grateful for. Unfortunately, it was denied, and then I was forced to navigate the system that I knew from previous experience was basically a series of directions through a maze of broken systems with ridiculous barriers to access, a lack of transparency, and a million dead ends, as well as limited options for shelter and support, including through the legal aid tenancy hearing, where the evidence and explanations I attempted to present were not submitted as evidence, which I truly believe is why the tenancy officer made the decision that ultimately left my roommate and I homeless. I feel, and this may be ignorance on my part, but I do not believe due process was upheld. I had also hoped to receive support from my MLA on the matter, but that did not happen. I was told by many social workers and others to go to the news, but no one was interested in picking up my story, and I felt so confused and rejected by that reality. It took a lot for me to even get to that point where I was willing to talk about it. And what I was most concerned about is being unheard, once again, failing to make any change, and most of all, forgetting my experience and unlearning what I've been through and its importance to so many people.
I saw a video that you put out. You had received your belongings. How long did you go without your belongings? And can you describe what it's like packing your stuff up with uncertainty of when you're going to get that stuff back?
So I went with my belongings for a very short period of time, from the 31st of March until the 13th of April. The one item that really mattered was my CPAP machine, which helps me with my severe obstructive sleep apnea. Also, I really, really missed my bed. It is so nice not to have to sleep in a car or on a little piece of foam. Honestly, my belongings were the least of my concerns. My mother thankfully got 1 free month of storage, and that really helped. Also, with little time after the tenancy officer's decision, I really tried hard to find a space for us to live. And my mother hired a moving company to help us pack and move my belongings. The first company had to cancel the day of, as they were meant to start packing, but due to a medical emergency with their dog, had to, not do that. And thankfully, Hunter's Moving was able to come in and save the day. So a majority of that packing was done in 3 days. One of which was the first day of moving things, followed by a second day to collect the rest. They were great. I do not know how much it cost, to be candid, and my anxiety is too scared to ask my mother.
If you're just joining us, my name is Matthew. This is Truth from the Booth, and this is my guest, Lindsay Eagleson, in Truro, Nova Scotia. We're discussing being unhoused in 2026. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be back with the second half of this conversation right here on folkedupradio.com. Halifax, Nova Scotia, home of talk radio, Truth from the Booth, an ongoing awareness campaign keeping Canada's housing crisis on the front burner and in the moment right here in the Halifax Regional Municipality, the Maritimes, and beyond. True, real-life stories told by those living it, existing in the streets. They bear all and provide you a brief glimpse into an unimaginable world of misery and disappointment, resilience, and triumph. Hear from those with boots on the ground advocating for change now. The stories of the unhoused need to be told by them to educate you, all of us. Hear all the conversations Sundays at 10 a.m. with a repeat at 6 p.m. here on folkedupradio.com. Now, back to today's fantastic guest. Can you just quickly talk about what's the feeling like when you sign your name on a brand new lease?
I had both fear and relief at finding a place and officially signing a lease. It meant I could finally start to recover from everything and have an opportunity to rebuild, as well as have my daughter back. However, it did not take long before I started experiencing mixed feelings of guilt, shame, and anxiety at the idea that I could end up back in my car or even on the street. that fear of losing it all over again and again is like still in my mind. And like, as I feel that at any time I have a medical emergency, it will lead to this exact same outcome.
Well, the situation that you're in, you're living in your vehicle for, like, even if you're there for a night, that's one night too long. But you also have, you have two dogs. What's it like? There's got to be another level of anxiety with pets in the vehicle as well.
Like, I really tried to have like an optimistic outlook when I realized that I could not bring myself to rehoming my dogs. And when I knew that I had the support of my mom in finding a place and would eventually find an apartment like as soon as possible. But unfortunately, because I was not leaving a domestic abuse situation at the time and was not currently recovering from a medical emergency, I didn't qualify for pause for support through the SPCA. And despite the overwhelming support from the community in trying to find a temporary foster, the individual who was kind enough to help me let me know that my younger pup Jasper was just not doing well. And the day after I left, I needed to go return to get them. Rock was very good there. He stayed by his brother's side and supported him. And although she said she could watch him, so I only had to have one of the pups in the car with me, I felt like it was important to keep them together with me. She is still in touch with me, and her kindness has been really unforgettable, as I honestly imagine that she would just move on after what happened. And it really goes to show that there are really genuinely amazing people out there who are so good-hearted. However, while living in the car, I had a lot of fear about being caught or even reported, waking up to a police officer knocking on my window, getting tickets, having the car towed or worse, impounded, or being stranded with my dogs or losing them, having them taken away. It was also impossible for me to find crown land to park and camp out on. I had a lot of anxiety regarding what I was going to do. I would have panic attacks and breakdowns when no one is around. I felt like I was doing criminal or illegal necessities just for trying to survive and get out of my situation. And my dogs help me stay sane. Like, they are really my emotional support dogs, and I am apparently also their emotional support human. We are family. We spent much of our time going to dog parks, and despite my concerns for Jasper being reactive near other dogs after being attacked last summer, he has made amazing strides and connections in the Truro Dog Park. Shout out to Truro for being like super dog friendly, as well as like recently in our building and at the Halifax Mainland Commons Off-Leash Dog Park. I do not think it's right for landlords to discriminate against pets, or in more severe cases, children, which I've seen a lot more in Vancouver. Additionally, I do not think it is right to not consider housing someone just because they are on income assistance.
I want to move on to something else, and I appreciate your time and your input. It's just so helpful to the audience. The shelter in Kentville, Nova Scotia is back in the news for all the wrong reasons. I know personally you have not had a shelter experience, but in your opinion, how do they need to change in order for folks to want to go there in the extreme emergency situation?
I would highly recommend a mixed method of a housing first policy, which is implemented in Finland, which has the lowest rate of homelessness. They understand that the primary needs must first be secure before addressing concerns of substance abuse, which is like a flight response to trauma, and especially before the requirement to find work. Speaking from experience, when you have compounding factors affecting your stability and well-being, finding work becomes next to, if not impossible, especially when aiming for long-term success that does not waste the taxpayers' money, and primarily those most vulnerable success at stability. We also need rental protections, as well as maintenance and infrastructure that equitably supports individuals who have a wide array of needs. Focus on providing opportunity for growth of our people and not an upward economic graph line.
In your personal experience, Lindsay, what were some of the barriers that you faced, and in your own opinion, how could things be streamlined?
Honestly, I believe we have an ecological systems failure that needs to be addressed. When we do that through meeting individuals' basic needs, we are going to see true growth.
What's your take on society right now just not helping themselves, belittling those that are in an extremely unfortunate situation, life or death, survival mode?
I believe that the mentality of belittling others is fundamentally taught. And as a society, as well as individuals, we must be willing to accept that not all we were taught through our development was right, and that we have a duty to be curious, challenge our perspectives, learn and accept others' unique perspectives, and how to reteach ourselves. We can't change how others think or feel, but those who are willing and already making those changes will see that the effort is not in vain. We make change when we are able to focus on what unifies us versus focusing in a negative way about what sets us apart. I truly believe that when we can do that, we can absolutely do amazing things.
In this moment, Lindsay Eagleson, how do you view yourself?
I have had a shifting view of myself that is sometimes influenced by what others said or assumed about me. Growing up, I was often called weird, too sensitive, dramatic, a million things. However, as psychologist Lev Vygotsky theorized, our inner voice is developed by the social interactions we experience through our development. If we have kind, loving relationships, our inner voice will likely reflect that. As is the same if one grows up with an abusive or belittling relationships, it's going to reflect that as well. We really are just a bunch of unhealed children in big bodies, especially when we are under threat, stress, or generally dysregulated. Especially when our basic needs are not met, it becomes much harder for us to use our executive functioning skills when you are placed in chaos and are reacting through our emotional and survival states.
I want to make reference to a post that you put up on your own social media. When you're unhoused, is there a feeling of criminality, or do you view yourself as a criminal, or do you think that society in general views you as some type of criminal when you are unhoused?
Yeah, I felt like I was treated like an unstable criminal after my breakdown years ago. It was hard not to believe the worst of myself. Everything I said was not considered credible due to that event following my misdiagnosis. And I truly felt like a monster. I was so distraught. I couldn't eat. My use of cannabis skyrocketed at that time, and I felt like I could not trust or let my guard down near anyone. It was extremely isolating, especially when I actually was isolated in the country with no license or car at the time. I was really at the mercy of others. But I had to learn through therapy that I had already gone through so much and that I was resilient. This time around, I still had my ups and downs, but now I have the gumption to say what I have learned through all of those teachable failures. I learned that I was proud of all the times I tried to help and advocate for others, even if they failed time after time. I also promised myself that I would never protect someone from the consequences of their actions ever again, as it is a form of self-abandonment to others and myself, and in the end can cost you, like it did me, to everything that I had worked towards, loved, and valued. I no longer explain away cruelty as just a cry for compassion, but as what it truly is, which is harm. Harm to others, and also harm to myself with sacrifices made through people-pleasing and also ultimately through self-abandonment.
You made a comment on social media that, and I thought this was rather curious, which is why I want you to talk about it. Organizations will help you after you are officially homeless. What does that mean?
Initially, I was encouraged to try and remain where I was, but when that was not possible, and many times before, when I reached out, I would be told that I did not qualify for organizations like ADSUM, as I did not have a lease or a job lined up. And we're still talking, and I hope that they can help in any way they can. However, many other programs told me and my roommate that we could not be accepted to a shelter or housing support unless we were no longer living inside. We were required to be out on the street before we were able to get any assistance. And often they had a list of others who were already waiting to get the help they also needed.
Again, I appreciate your time. I want to backtrack just a little bit. You said earlier in the show that you spent months talking to MLAs and organizations, and you described it as exhausting. In what way is that exhausting?
It was exhausting in like every facet, mentally, physically, like emotionally. It was everything. Every time I even allowed myself a glimmer of hope or even like cautious optimism, I was reminded how ineffective these systems are designed. This is not to say that many of those in the system are not amazing people that are trying their best to make a better world, but there is a lot of red tape that I want to tear apart and burn so a better process can rise from the ashes like a kick-ass phoenix of justice and care.
Well, the one way to do that is on social media, which leads me to this. What are some of the difficulties staying connected with the outside world without technology? Like, for instance, when you're in a car, you have to make sure that your phone is charged, and even that can be problematic. So can you just talk about the technical difficulties of staying connected when you're unhoused and your experience?
It is really difficult to keep your phone charged, and honestly, I am terrified of what my phone bill will look like after all that, and the money I owe to like Nova Scotia Power on top of the rental arrears and skills development makes me feel like I'm starting at a deficit when I was expecting to get through school debt-free and with a way to contribute positively to my community. But it was really difficult.
So difficulty. What are some of your personal challenges right now in this moment, Lindsay?
Most things are challenging. The space I moved into has cockroaches, which is a real shock to learn the night before my belongings arrived. They did come and treat it, which is nice. On top of that, I am a single mom with 2 dogs. I am used to doing things on my own and stepping in to help others the best I can, but I feel extremely limited in what I'm able to accomplish and achieve when I am not sure what is going to come around the corner next. The government still owes me taxes. I have not received my child benefit tax, and I'm not even sure how long. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but many of us are struggling and isolated from the stress and idea of being a burden.
You put a video out, and this may seem silly to some people, but for those that are outside, knowing where washrooms are of great importance. So how important is it to not only know where washrooms are, but use the washroom when possible?
That was a learning experience. So when you do not have continued access to a bathroom, it really suddenly dawns on you how important it is to go every time you get the chance. Sometimes I would like, one more time, just in case. Let's just get back on there. It's actually one of the reasons I chose to stay in the Truro area, because they have a lot of dog-friendly spaces where you could go in with your dogs and go to the bathroom, which was extremely important for their safety, as I could not just leave them in the car couldn't leave them in the car like unsupervised for long. So I would often use porta potties, gas stations, and just in case, I asked my mother for a diaper, which I thankfully never had to use.
Wow, that's, I've seen all kinds of, one day in Grand Parade Square, someone who I just saw walking through the streets for the first time in like 2 years, he was dry shaving with one of the tiny mirrors inside of the porta potty. I've seen people, putting needles in their arms, just all kinds of wacky stuff. But that's something that most people don't think about. Like, use the washroom when you can. There's nothing worse than walking anywhere. Even worse if you're just wandering because you have nowhere to go. But having to use the washroom is just one of those most uncomfortable feelings. Just like being wet. It's just not a lot of fun. What are you learning about yourself, Lindsay, and how do you see yourself advocating for this in the future?
I learned that I am no longer willing to stay silent to keep a false sense of peace and comfort for those who would put me or anyone else in a situation that would lead to distress, insecurity, and harm. For some time, I lost my voice. I just wanted to pretend that I was not going through hell. I did not want to risk others being hurt by my speaking out, particularly, I wanted them to survive and move on as I went down with the ship after rocking the boat, as the sayings go, when I had that failed union. I learned it was easier for me to be the person others needed, but was too scared to stand up and be there for myself, especially beyond my small circle of people. It was hard for me to ask for help. It still is. I am someone who could not have more than 3 people at my wedding. I could not imagine anyone having any interest in what I had to say, especially when it was about me and what I was going through. I'm sure there are those who think I share a lot, who would be surprised with what I have kept quiet about.
I'm interested in your travels and your journeys through social media, the stories that you're hearing from others. What are you learning about comparative levels of homelessness? Is that a thing? And what guilt? Because I know a lot of people who are unhoused for whatever period, once they're back inside, they have this feeling of guilt that, oh, now I'm back inside, but my friends are still out there. Can you kind of walk us through that?
There are times when I do not feel like I should even say that I was homeless. Like, I know so many people who, like, they have gone through so much more than myself in that regard. And it feels like it would be conceited for me to even try to relate to so many others who have gone through that. And like, during this, I have had old friends reach out, sharing how they have gone through homelessness. And I never would have known if I did not share what I had posted. And I hate that they went through that. And I feel guilty that I didn't know. I feel guilt that my roommate is currently living in a shelter. I think about my family members who have been homeless, how much harder it is to get them the help they need, especially due to their mental health and like the lack of supports they receive. I see it in a whole new way, with a little bit more understanding and a whole lot more compassion. Like, I have connected with others who have had similar experiences or close calls, and I will admit there is a bit of frustration when individuals try to relate with a close call and tell me they understand when they did not get to the same depth of experience that I had or other people. Not to diminish their fear, but there is a different reality when you actually get to that point. And this is another reason I will never try to speak from a personal stance on what the spectrum of homelessness experience entails and is like. That is not fair or honest, and I know that there is much more I need to learn, more experiences I need to hear regarding homelessness, navigating systems, self-representing in court, parenting and separation. Like, we're all individuals with an original point of view and experience. And it's important that we talk and bring that together.
Absolutely. Let's close this out. I want to find out in this moment who inspires you, whether they're someone from the past, an inspirational figure from who is no longer with us. Who's your inspiration right now, Lindsay Eagleson?
Well, Street Dr. Jill is amazing. And I'm always trying to learn about all the amazing, brave, honest, and curious individuals who challenge us to build a more sustainable and kind world. Yuri Bronfenbrenner, who created the ecological systems theory, is like one of my all-times. Abraham Maslow, who created the hierarchy of needs. Like, I love so many others, like James Baldwin, Angela Davis, Maya Angelou, not Mariah. I do love Mariah. She is a huge influence, like, for me.
Mm-hmm.
Maria Montessori, like David Suzuki, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Bernie Sanders, Lev Vygotsky, Jean Piaget, Erik Erikson, Howard Gardner, Deborah Wren Etta Sullivan, many more, but most especially Robin Williams.
What I loved Robin Williams. I loved his work. What was it for you? Here's my thing. When I was younger, there were two people that I wanted to meet. When I was in like junior high school, I wanted to meet Robin Williams and Magic Johnson of the Lakers. What was it about Robin Williams for you, Lindsay?
His depth. I think growing up, and even as an adult, I feel like I feel emotions in a way that is so potent. And there was something so relatable to him. Like, I remember as a child, he made me cry when I watched Mist Doubtfire, when I was just like a little kid. Like, he was so relatable as a child. Like, he was so animated and funny, but he was authentic. And I think that really connected to people. Like, he was authentic. He wanted to help people. He even would make sure that homeless people would get hired. Like, he tried to do good.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
yeah, like, I admire him so much. He was like a TV uncle, giving me wise words of wisdom, like Uncle Iroh from like Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I've never heard like a TV uncle. That's wonderful. Let's close it out with this. You are now back inside of four walls. Is your family back together? Are your kids back with you?
No, not yet. I have one daughter, and I am actually getting her back tomorrow. I'm really excited. The place is still a mess, but
as of the airing, this show will air on Sunday. So as of the airing of the show, your daughter will be back with you.
Yes, she will.
Awesome.
I'm very excited. I'm so excited. Like I said, she is who I do everything for. But my biggest inspiration is my daughter. Before she was born, I wanted to be someone who filled her with pride and inspiration, but instead she taught me the importance of play, connection, mistakes, curiosity, and most of all, unconditional love. And I think that's something we all need.
Lindsay Eagleson, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on this show. You've really highlighted again the common thread of homelessness, being unhoused here in Nova Scotia, and the situation is the same here in the HRM as it is in Truro, as it is in Kentville, as it is in Amherst. And as long as the stories are out there and people want to share their stories, they can always do it here. So again, Lindsay Eagleson, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope we can talk again, because I believe what you're doing is so important. I believe the work of others like Mariah Baker is so important. You're really speaking up, because if we don't help from the base, we're not helping the foundation of our society.
And now for something completely different. April 20th, 420, has become the unofficial day for cannabis culture, and in places where it's legal, the celebrations can be loud, laid back, and very public. Parks fill up, music kicks in, smoke drifts through the crowd, and people gather to mark what started as a counterculture tradition and turned it into a worldwide date on the calendar. For some, it's about community and celebration. For others, it's part protest, part party, part political statement about legalization, freedom, and personal choice. And depending on where you are, the tone can change fast, from festival energy to simple, low-key get-togethers with friends. But underneath the jokes and the haze, 420 has always carried a bigger message. Cannabis is no longer just an underground culture. It is mainstream, commercial, and still heavily debated. So other people are celebrating, advocating, or just watching from the sidelines, 420 remains one of the most recognizable dates in modern pop culture. Happy 420. I'm Matthew, host of Truth from the Booth. Let's get you back to the music on Canada's #1 folk station, 99.9 FM Perth Andover, and folkedupradio.com.